Last year, Cabby Fingers and I started our work together on the Sign with Fingers Big and Small campaign in partnership with National Deaf Children's Society. Cabby Don't Work Fingers are made when everyone comes together. But for many people, these moments can be quite isolating as we find ourselves trying to piece bits of the conversation together. We set out to get people learning British Sign Language with everyday phrases so more of us can feel included in the conversation. And just like that, the campaign created awareness of my superpower. I am so excited to announce that this year I get to continue the partnership with Cabby Fingers as they have come on board to help me launch the first ever series of Superpowers with Tasha. Together, we want more people to share their own superpowers so more of us can feel included. As well as providing the best studio snack for me and my guests, getting to work with Cabby Fingers again means we will be reminding you regularly to keep learning a little BSL via the Sign with Fingers hub. You can even learn, would you like a snack? And my answer every time, yes. Head to signwithfingers.cabby.co.uk to start your BSL journey. Hi guys, and welcome back to Superpowers with Tasha, and today we've got an amazing guest who may recognise him from your TV screens and is big in the dance world. He recently found out about his autism at the age of 28, which is fairly recent, only last year. So I'd like to welcome social media star, TV personality and a great person, Malone Jr. Welcome to Superpowers with Tasha.
Hey, you alright?
Yeah, how are you?
Not bad.
Good, I'm glad. Where did you travel from today?
Manchester.
How was the journey?
It was long.
Was it long?
It was long. You know the long train that stops everywhere?
Oh, it's one of those ones.
That one.
Was it hot as well on the train?
It wasn't actually that bad.
Okay, because I feel like every time I go to Manchester, it's always really hot on the train.
No, it does get hot. It gets really hot, yeah.
So you found out about your autism at the age of 28, which was last year, if I'm correct.
I think either a week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a year, 2 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah. And how's that been for you, that year?
It's been weird because you spend your whole life, just kind of dealing with the way you are and thinking that you're a little bit weird.
Right.
And then, to have, a reason for it, it's like you kind of relearn things because you're like, oh, I don't do that just because I'm weird. It's because of the fact I'm autistic.
Right.
So, stuff that, even now I'll do certain things and I'll be like, oh, I do that weird because I'm autistic. It's not just a weird quirk I have. So it's a weird one where things that were normal for me are still normal, but I'm realizing that it's because of the autism, not just because I'm weird.
Yeah. So when you say you felt like you were weird, in what ways did you feel that you were weird? If that makes sense. What are the moments that kind of made you think that I'm different in a way?
So with me, I'm very straight to the point and very blunt. I communicate in a very straightforward way.
Okay.
So I was always the problem child that my mum was like, Tom, why did you say that? I remember I was at a dance competition once when I was a kid, and one of the girls had done her makeup different, and she was talking about her makeup was different, and I was like, yeah, it looks weird. And obviously to me, I just mean it looks different than usual.
Yeah, yeah.
Apparently most people would word it differently. So then she ends up in tears. Her mum's saying to my mum, why did Tom say that? And it's just stuff like that. I would read the room wrong, say the wrong thing at the wrong time, say it direct and not realise that you should kind of beat around the bush with certain things. And just stuff like that. I always wrong thing at the wrong time. And I'd always have to do things in a particular way. And there's so much to it that it really shapes everything you do. That's one thing that I've had to kind of realize is that because it's a whole different neurotype.
Yeah.
It's your brain is it processes information differently. So you're literally processing the world in a different way to most people.
Right.
So in terms of that, it's probably shaped every single aspect of my life, and I've just never realized.
Yeah. And what was the moment for you to kind of the click moment of, okay, I want to go get diagnosed? What was that moment of maybe I have got autism?
So people had always mentioned it from being young about oh, you must be on the spectrum and stuff. But because I'd always been able to function in society, I'd always been very much oh, if I am, I am. If I'm not, I'm not. It doesn't really matter to me too much to get a diagnosis. And then one of my nephews was suspected of having autism. And a lot of the behaviours that he like displayed that are the reasons why they suspected it was stuff that I used to do as a kid.
Right.
So for me, I thought if I go and get tested and I'm not, then fine, I know I'm not. And if I am, like, he won't have to grow up not having someone that he can relate to. Because, like, his mum's not autistic. There would be no one else in the family that's autistic. So, like, as much as he can go and speak to his mum and stuff about anything,
Yeah.
like, there'll be stuff that she still wouldn't be able to relate to, whereas he could always come to me, and chances are I've been through the same thing. So when I first got diagnosed, it was more so that he would have someone to relate to.
No, that's really
And then
nice.
as I realised that, I was like, oh, well, there's probably a bunch of kids out there that feel the same way. So I might as well be, like, really open with it on my social media and stuff and just change the stigmas around it. Because I'm not the sort of person that people would immediately associate as being an autistic person. Like, if you go onto, like, TV and, like, films and stuff, like, the autistic person that they show is always, like, someone who's really academic and, like, got these really weird, quirky things that they do. It's never someone that people would perceive as, like, being a dancer that performs in front of a bunch of people or anything like that. So I thought it makes sense to break down those stigmas so that other kids can be like, oh, just because I'm autistic doesn't mean I can't do this or I can't do that. And so, yeah, I think originally I got diagnosed because of my nephew.
Yeah.
And then after that, I realised that there's actually more people that I can hopefully have a positive impact on.
Yeah, you are having a positive impact. I looked at your TikTok and your socials, and you really are being that voice, and you are helping out all those people out there with autism. And how did it feel to do that first? I saw your social media post where you announced it, kind of. And how does that feel to kind of share it with the world, basically? Was it kind of like a weight off your shoulders, or did you feel like, okay, it's more like a internal kind of thing that you felt like you needed to do it? Or obviously use a platform as well?
I feel like there was a bit of both like that. There was never any doubt that I would be open with it because of my nephew and stuff. Like, I would never have shied away from it because I wouldn't want him to ever feel like there's anything he needs to shy away from. Like, that's who you are. So for me, there was never any sort of option other than to be open with it. But there was an element of, I wonder how people will respond to the fact that now I have something that's seen as, like, a disability, and, like, you're never quite sure how people will take it. So there was an element of, I guess, going into the unknown. But it was never really a choice for me. Like, I'd rather be open with it and own it because it's who I am than to shy away from it.
And how did people respond to it?
A lot of positivity, actually.
Yeah.
Like, there was a lot of people that I didn't realise how many people that, like, I've got autistic children or autistic people already followed me. Like, because I found out late, I wasn't aware of just how common it is.
Yeah.
So the amount of people that were like, oh, this makes me feel so much better because I followed you for this long and I'm actually also autistic. And there was a lot of that. There was also a lot of people who were tagging other people that they knew onto the page because they knew people that were autistic.
Yeah.
Like, it was massively positive, to be honest.
That's really good to hear. 'Cause, you want to have that support and community from the people that follow you, and the fact that you had people with autism that followed you as well. I bet that was a really nice feeling to kind of see that and, that connection. You already have that connection with them, and you have more of a connection because, now so you've got autism. So it's probably really special for you to see that. Like, it's been amazing.
For sure. It was like, obviously you get the odd people that don't really understand it.
Yeah.
But I take that as an opportunity to educate. So, like, you'll get people that are like, oh, well, you're obviously on this end of the spectrum. And it's like, well, the spectrum isn't linear. It doesn't have. And so then it kind of opens up the conversation where a lot of people don't know about it. It's like, oh, well, I know what you've said. You've tried to come at it from a negative point of view. But I can use this opportunity to kind of show people what it actually is so that less people now have that sort of stigma in their head.
What are the stigmas around autism?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Massively.
What kinds of is there like specific stereotypes that people say or stigmas around autism, and how do you break that down?
Yeah, so there's just the stigmas that you'd be like an academic kid, you're probably into some like Harry Potter and Star Wars and like all the stuff that's typically seen as like kind of nerdy, which is ironic because I'm like the biggest Harry Potter fan in the world. But like that doesn't make you a nerd or anything like that. And even that, like, if you are academic, like, that just means you do well at school. That's a positive thing, right? So,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, true.
I think like there's a lot of weird stigmas, but they also, it's the same as anything else. So with it being a neurotype, that's like saying that everyone that's neurotypical is exactly the same.
Right.
So if someone would presume that all autistic people are the same, it's the same way as being like, well, then everyone that's not autistic is automatically the same, automatically into all the same things. Automatically, if one's a bad person, you must all be bad people. Like,
Yeah.
so it makes no sense to presume that just because one person's autistic, all of the autistic people must fit the same brief.
Right. Yeah.
Like, for example, you do occasionally get comments where it's like, oh, well, you can't be autistic because my cousin's son's autistic and you're nothing alike. And it's like, well, that makes sense with different people. Like,
Yeah. Not everyone's going to be the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right.
So that, like, there's a lot of that, but outside of that, I think it just comes down to education. Like, there's a lot of, like, there's just not a lot of education properly around autism. Like,
Yeah.
for me, I personally think that obviously going back, there's a lot of traits in me that I see in older family members.
Okay.
But growing up, I guess it was just seen as like, oh, he's just like that person. So it's not because he's autistic. It just
Right.
runs in the family.
Yeah.
But then to think that when that person was growing up, autism probably wasn't talked about at all.
Yeah. Well known. Yeah.
So there was no need to think that they might have had something that no one talked about.
Yeah.
So then it goes back to, there's probably people out there that aren't getting diagnosed because they just see it as a family trait rather than an autistic trait.
Right.
So I think that also ties into like the stigmas and stuff where unless it's like on the end of the spectrum where, well, not the end because it's not a linear spectrum, but unless it's in like that area of the spectrum where you like find it a little bit harder to function in society,
Yeah.
then a lot of the time it probably gets swept under the carpet as just like, oh, it's just something that runs in the family or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, so we take it back to school a little bit. How was it for you in school? Like, was it like academically and just like socially as well? Like, was it tough for you in school, or were you? Because obviously, I feel like in school, like, was teacher supportive of you? Because obviously, you didn't know you had autism then. But do you reckon if you did know you had autism back then, would your experience be different?
Yeah, 100%. My experience would be different, but I think so. This goes into where there's also benefits of it as well. So like I'm able to really hyper focus on things that I'm passionate about.
Okay.
So like the subjects that I didn't really enjoy, I would just be like, I don't care. Like I don't really want to be here. I'm never going to use this again, sort of thing. Which isn't a great attitude to have, but it's just the way I am. I find it hard to apply myself to something that I don't care about.
Yeah.
But the subjects that I enjoyed, I excelled in. Like I was like really good at them all, and even like the subjects that I didn't enjoy as much, I was still academically like quite good at. Like I was in like the top sets for everything, but I just wouldn't apply myself more than necessary.
Yeah.
But stuff that I enjoy, I like dive into. So academically, I like excelled in all that sort of stuff. In terms of like the social side of things at school, I was kind of a bit like a social butterfly. Like I would get along a bit with everyone, but I think that was more so because I'd learnt to mask by that point.
Yeah.
And I think because with my dance stuff, because I was achieving quite a lot in something that I was passionate about, like in outside of school, when I was at school, I still had a sense of self-worth of, oh, well, I'm good at what I do.
Yeah.
So it made the social side of things easier because it was like, I know that I have self-worth, so I'm not going to doubt that when I speak to people, which is something I'm passionate about, like, is the fact that, like, it was very beneficial for me that I found something that I loved, like, back then, because it helped me so much through the times when, like, I probably would have struggled a lot more socially if it weren't for that.
Yeah, I can totally relate with dancing. Like, that's same as me. Dancing was my safe space and still is to this day. And what got you into dancing? Was it just a local dance school, or what was the first kind of moment that you found out about dancing?
So basically my sister, like my mum had like my mum and dad, but my mum was like a stay-at-home mum, like raising us and stuff. So there was me, my sister, and my younger brother that were all like under 5 at the same time.
Oh.
So like, yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. And my eldest brother, like he weren't like much older as well. He was like 8 at the time. So like a lot of us, when one of us was doing something, the others would get brought along a lot of the time. So my sister started dancing.
Okay.
So my sister went to like a tap and ballet class, and my mum had me and my brother there as well. And I just started joining in at the back, like, of my own accord.
Yeah.
So my mum turned around to my dad and was like, "Oh, I think Tom wants to dance." And my dad was like, "Well, let him."
Yeah, that's amazing.
And then, so it was a woman called Jean Geddes that just had like a local dance school.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Jean Geddes. Shout out. But yeah, so she had a local dance school, and it all started from there, really.
Yeah, amazing. And to this day now, like, since you found out you had autism, has it changed for you with dancing? Because obviously I saw you at the Capital Jingle Bell Ball. I was actually there watching the show.
Oh, sick.
Yeah, so I saw you with all the dancers. And I just thought, wow, it's so cool. How did that feel for you up there? Because that was in December, wasn't it? So how did that feel for you doing that?
That was crazy.
Yeah.
That was such a weird experience, like, because as a dancer, like, most of my career was dancing behind other artists and stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, to be at the front with, like, my own backing dancers and stuff was such a weird experience. Like,
I can imagine.
I got to come out the stage at the beginning and stuff. I was like, who do I think I am? Like, some Michael Jackson business. I was like, this is crazy. But yeah, it was sick. And it's weird because dancing is something I've done, like, for as long as I can remember, and something I'm so comfortable with. Mm-hmm. It's like, that's the only time that I can be the center of attention and not feel weird about it.
Okay.
So, like, and this is something that I've only really started to understand since being diagnosed as well, is like, I hate being the center of attention.
Right.
Like, I cannot stand it. Like, being somewhere and people are singing happy birthday, I will leave. Please do not.
Not now, please.
Never, ever. Yeah, I hate it. But, like, I realise it's because I don't show that much emotion a lot of the time.
Okay.
Because of, like, the autism. So a lot of the time I'm like, I don't know how I'm meant to react in this moment.
Yeah.
But, like, being on stage doing something that I'm so comfortable with is, like, the only time that I don't mind being like, this is me and this is what I do.
Yeah.
And I enjoy this.
Yeah.
So, like, being able to do that on stage in front of, like, I can't remember how many people it was. It was like 16,000 or something crazy like that. Like, that was a really surreal experience.
Yeah, that's amazing. And do you feel music differently, or do you interpretate? Is it interpretate? What's the word?
Interpret.
I
like interpretate. We can keep it.
Interpretate.
Yeah.
Like, do you do you feel music differently, or like, is dance, like, how do you? Cause obviously for me, I feel it like through my body, like vibrations. That's
really cool.
Feel the music. So I feel it a bit differently. I wasn't sure if, for you, if it's different for you as well.
I think probably to a level, because, like, with autism, you have, like, sensory overload and stuff, where things like some of your senses can be, like, really tuned into stuff, and it can throw you off sometimes. But, like, I think everyone probably experiences music slightly differently. But I think, because, like, auditory is something that I struggle with, like, my autism and stuff. I think I definitely listen to music in a different way.
Yeah.
To a lot of people, like, in terms of, like, the layers and the textures and stuff. And
yeah,
I think to an extent it probably helps.
Yeah.
A lot rather than hinders when it comes to dance stuff.
Yeah. So what do you mean by the auditory, that it affected you differently? What do you mean by that?
So, like, if, say, I'm, like, trying to concentrate on something, if there's, like, the smallest sound somewhere, like, I won't be able to zone it out.
Okay, so
like,
you'd hear it.
And it'll just get louder and louder, like, it'll just start overwhelming me. And, like, when I was a kid, this is one of the things that my nephew did that my mum was like, Tom used to do that. Yeah. It's like, if he's focused on something or playing and there's noise around him, he'll start humming to try and drown it out.
Okay.
And then if the noise gets louder, he starts humming louder.
Okay.
And that's what I used to do when I was little. Or, like I would just remove myself completely.
Yeah.
And, like, that's something that I've learned to do as I've got older to cope with stuff. Is, like, if I'm, like, simple stuff like putting in your bank details and stuff when you're like doing something online.
Yeah.
It's like, if there's too much stuff going on around me, I get really, like, overwhelmed and frustrated. Okay. So I just have to, like, take myself out of the situation, go and sit in a room by myself where it's quiet and just
kind of get back, ground yourself, basically. Okay. Yeah. That's really interesting, because I didn't know that. I'm learning so much talking to you as well. Like, I didn't really know much about autism, and all this information you're giving me is like, wow, okay, it is a lot that you do go through as well, because I can imagine it's draining. I saw on your TikTok about autistic overload. Yeah, I saw that TikTok. Can you tell me a little bit more about what autistic overload is?
Yeah, so it's like a burnout kind of like in terms of, so for a lot of autistic people, when we're socializing,
Yeah.
a lot of the things that for most people is subconscious, we do consciously.
Okay.
So for example, like I naturally, when I was a kid, I wouldn't really like do the eye contact thing very much.
Okay.
And then I was in training for Billy Elliot when I was younger. My mum was like, Tom, you're in a room with big directors. You need to look people in the eye. And obviously this was before she knew I was autistic.
Yeah, yeah.
So I took it all the way the other end. So I'd like, was just staring people in the eyes then. So then it got like too intense. So like stuff like eye contact, where most people would be like naturally looking at someone and looking away. When I'm speaking to someone, I'm consciously like, look them in the eye, and then I'm like, okay, this is getting weird now. You're looking too long. Now look away. And then now look back. So I'm consciously doing that the whole time I'm speaking to them.
Right, okay.
Whilst also trying to read the room for what's appropriate to say, what's not. Whilst also trying to display, like, not look too like emotionally dead and stuff at the same time. So like, I'm consciously like making all those calculations at the same time as having a conversation.
Wow.
So like, if you're out in a social environment, it gets so draining so quick. So like, the way it might take someone a few hours for their social battery to die, like mine can go so quick. If there's too many people I don't know in one space, yeah, it goes so quick, and I'm like, it's time to go home.
Yeah, no, I'm literally, that's crazy you say that, because I'm literally the same. My social battery goes, like, literally, if I go to an event, for example, yesterday I was at Silverstone. After like 3 hours, I was like, I'm ready to go. Like, it's just so much noise. I have to read quite a lot and have conversations in noisy places. So I get that feeling when you feel drained. You just feel exhausted to the point that you can't even speak yourself. So like, what do you do to recharge your battery? Like, do you just go home? Like, what are the things you do at home to kind of just, you know, take a breather and just ground yourself?
So for me, a lot of the time, if I do choose to go out and stuff like that, like I'll never let it hinder me from doing stuff that I enjoy, because I do like going out. I do like being social. It's just it's draining for me.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is like my support network's great. Like I've had the best circle of friends around me from being like 15, 16, like, and it's never changed. I've always had the same people around me. So because I'm so comfortable in that environment with them, like we'll go out together, and they kind of ground me a little bit in terms of like interacting with them is so easy because they know me from how I've been from way back. So I never have to try and mask in front of them or anything like that. So when I'm dealing with other people, it's a little bit less draining because I know that I can be a bit more authentically myself. Yeah. Even though that since I've been diagnosed, I feel like I'm more authentically myself anyway, because I'm like, well, I don't need to try and change how I act for anyone. But I think naturally, because you've done it for so long, there'll still be an element of it that creeps in, because you don't want to make other people feel awkward as well.
Yeah, yeah. Of course.
So I think having them there often makes it easier for me.
Yeah.
And then if not, like, I'll just go home, and a lot of the time I'll either just sit and put music on and just have like my own time.
Yeah.
Or like sometimes I'm that tired, I'll just sit, like I'll get home and I'll sit down and I'll forget that I'm not doing anything, and then like I'll look at my phone and like an hour's passed and I've just not done anything. I've just sat in silence, like.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's crazy like how we have similar experiences for different disabilities, basically. Sorry, my voice is going. Put it back. So Gogglebox, obviously well known for Gogglebox.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about how did you even get onto Gogglebox? How did that opportunity come around?
So Gogglebox was a weird one because they scout people. Okay. You don't apply. So I was teaching at a dance studio in Manchester called Studio 25. And at the time they were like short on people for reception. So my mum had come in to like work on reception for a few weeks. Yeah. And there was a woman upstairs that used to always complain about the noise. And she'd been on the phone to my mum, and like, I think she'd been annoying, and my mum had everyone laughing because like the woman was being annoying. The way my mum was being like polite, but also very much like, you're being annoying to this woman. Okay. People were laughing, and then like me and my mum were having banter and stuff, and then they basically rang the studio, but they didn't speak to my mum. They spoke to Sue, the lady that owned it. Okay. And was like, do you know any families that would be good for it? So she suggested me and my mum. Okay. So then the next day they came in, and there's like the reception, and there's a glass wall behind the reception with like the studio behind it.
Yeah.
So they've said to my mum, like, "Oh, are you Julie?" She said, "Yeah." And they've gone, "Is that Tom?" And my mum's turned around, and I was trying to work out why my windmill to headspin wasn't working right. So they've looked into the studio behind it and gone, "Is that Tom?" And I was stood with my head against the wall doing this. So they must have been like, "He's not okay. This is going to make good TV."
That's what dance training does to you.
Yeah. We're all weird. So, yeah, they asked us to do it. And my mum was like, "Well, I'll have to ask my husband."
Yeah.
So my mum spoke to my dad. And at the time, we didn't fully understand what it was. We'd never watched it at the time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't as big as it is now. And yeah, so she told my dad, and we were like, "There's going to be cameras in the house all the time." That's what we thought at the time. And my dad was like, "No, so if I'm getting up, going to work, and I walk downstairs in my underwear, like, no, absolutely not." And then they were like, "No, the cameras are only there on filming days." And then my dad was like, "Well, we've got 6 Rottweilers, like it won't work." And they were like, "That's even better," because in their head they're just thinking this sounds like a crazy house. Like.
Yeah.
So in the end we agreed to do the test shoot, did the test shoot, and somewhere in between doing the test shoot and being told that like they wanted us to do it, I was home late one night and I think a rerun came on, and like my mum shouted me downstairs and we watched it, and it was actually like funny. So then we was like, "All right, cool, we'll do it." And then yeah, it just took over our life for like 7 years. My mum and dad still do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. 7 years. That's
a long time.
And how did you find the experience? And this is actually quite an interesting question. Obviously, you know that you got autism now.
Yep.
If you knew back then, would you still have done Gogglebox?
Yeah, 100%. I think I'd never turn down an opportunity because of my autism. Like I would never allow myself not to do something. It's like when I get invited to like premieres and stuff, like as much as I'm like, there's going to be a lot of people looking at me, people pointing cameras at me and like speaking to people and stuff. Like I'll never not go because I'm like, I'm not going to be someone that shies away from things because of it. Like I know that there's ways I can cope with it now that I can use to get through those things. And if I enjoy doing these things, I'm not going to say no just because of that. Yeah. So like Gogglebox would have been the same thing. I definitely would have done it always. That's
really good to hear because, you know, I feel like that's a really powerful message is that, you know, you don't let it affect you or shy away from it. It's about, you know, this is who I am. There's ways to cope with it. I can turn it into a positive kind of situation. And obviously you mentioned that you had dogs.
Yeah.
So 6 Rottweilers, right?
Yeah. Well, at the time it was 5 Rottweilers and a staff.
Oh, I love Rottweilers. They're so cute. So dogs like therapy to you as well? Like, because for me, with my puppy, I feel like she's just like a little like outlet to her all the time. Like, I feel like dogs just know. Was that the same for you? Like, did you feel like they were kind of your? Obviously, you're allergic to dogs as well.
So like, I love dogs. Like, I'll have dogs when I'm older. Like, I'll always have dogs. Yeah. But I am very allergic to dogs. Like, and my mum and dad didn't realise.
Right.
So like when I was born, they already had a dog. Okay. So I grew up basically with my mum and dad being like, "Why are you always ill?" Like I always had a cold. Like
oh no.
Constantly it was like even like now I struggle to fall asleep like breathing out of my nose. Right. Because like growing up, my nose was always blocked.
Oh no.
So literally for 20 years I went through a 20-year allergic reaction, constant. Moved to London, and for some reason no one has ever moved to London and been like, "I can breathe." Like the air down London is terrible, but I moved to London and suddenly could breathe out of my nose. I was like, this is sick. I'm cured.
It's like, what's going on? London cured me.
Yeah, I'm cured. I'm amazing. So I'm going through London now. I can breathe through my nose. Great. And then it came to film the next series. I went back to film and literally walked in within about 20 minutes. Was like, "I'm getting a cold." Like, and I just thought it was a cold. And then Dave, like the dog that's always a problem, like he's an idiot. He jumped on me basically, and within like 5 minutes, I just started getting like a rash on my arms, like with these like kind of like hive like things, and I was like, "What is going on?" And then I realised I'm allergic to dogs and never realised.
Oh no, that's crazy. 20 years.
And my mum was like, "Oh well, it's a good job you've already moved out."
Fair enough.
She was like, "Otherwise, we would never have gotten rid of the dogs, you know." Like, if we had dogs first, you wouldn't be here.
Basically, the dog's over you, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's crazy. Like, it's amazing to hear your story and the journey that you've gone on. And like, when I look at you, the way you use your platform, like, you really should be proud of yourself, of the way that you really are utilising your platforms. I think it's so important to have, role models to do this. And what's the best advice you could give to the younger generation or anybody that's kind of, found out they've got autism and what to do with it? And what's the advice that you could give to them?
I think what really helped me was the fact that I found something I'm passionate about very young. So the fact that I found dance and I was good at it, like, really gave me a sense of self-worth and made, like, I've always been very secure in who I am because I know what I'm passionate about and I know that I work hard at it and whatever. So it made everything else easier because no matter what anyone else can say to me, I'm still, like, succeeding at the thing that I'm passionate about. And I think that really helps. Like, having that sense of self-worth means that you don't let other people affect you as much.
Yeah.
And I think that always helps me massively.
That's a really nice message. It's just basically, knowing your self-worth is so important because I feel like it is hard to find that self-worth, but if you find something you love doing and that's your safe space, that's really going to help you on your journey into life.
Massively.
Like with dancing, it was my thing that I just did all the time, like going to class and just dancing it out, and I just love, like, the feeling of it. Like, you need to find that kind of home it's home, isn't it?
And it's expression. So if ever you do feel a bit rubbish, like, it's a place you can go to kind of vent without taking it out on anyone.
Yeah. I love it because, like, you go into class, you kind of put on, like, a character, don't you? A facade. And like one day I'm like feeling a bit sassy, so I'm going to put a little, like, sassy facade on. Or you're doing a contemporary dance, it's a bit sad, and you do, like, a little, like, it's like crazy. It's like character work, isn't it, with dancing as well? But
literally.
Yeah, it's, like you said, it's about finding what works for you, and knowing your self-worth is so important in your journey. So you're an ambassador for the National Autistic Society.
Yep.
So when did you join the society to be an ambassador?
I actually can't remember when I joined, but it was like one of the first things. Like, when I got diagnosed, they send you, like, a package of, like, all the things and, like, resources and stuff that might be able to help you, and that was, like, one of the top ones.
Yeah.
And when I was looking through stuff, it was like their stuff kept coming up of, like, the things they help people with and how they try and, like, help autistic children, like the families of autistic people and stuff that are, like, also dealing with it. So I think they were always doing really good work, and I kept seeing it, and eventually, like, they reached out to us, or did we reach out to them? But and I really wanted to be involved with them and, like, just help do what they're doing and hope that they can, further my voice with what I'm doing. And it's been a really good partnership.
That's really nice to hear, like, becoming ambassador for something so important and close to your heart as well. With your future and, what's kind of, like, your dream, your goal that you want to achieve in the future?
So I really want to make, like, the arts more accessible for both, like, autistic children and eventually, like, more, like, neurodiverse children in general, and also just for working class children. I feel like I got lucky that I ended up finding it because my sister went to a ballet class and stuff, and because I was a boy, like, it's easier for boys to get scholarships and stuff a lot of the time because there's less of us doing it. So I managed to do a lot for a lot, like, less expense than most people have, and luckily I had two very supportive parents that were willing to, like my dad worked 7 days a week from me being tiny, like, all my life, to be able to pay for me to go and do dance classes and boxing and stuff when I was doing that. So, like, I'm lucky that I've had that, and not everyone does have that. So I want to make, like, the arts more accessible for both working class children and just neurodiverse kids in general. So hopefully I can do more to push that as well.
So I always ask this question. So obviously this podcast is called Superpowers with Tasha. What would you say your superpower is?
I would say being very secure in myself. I'd say my superpower is the fact that no matter what anyone says to me, like, if I know it's not true, then it can't affect me.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that's not very easy to do. Like, it's easier said than done. But I think it's like everyone can work on it, and no one's ever going to be, like, 100% bulletproof.
Yeah.
But I think as long as you know who you are, then you can't let outside things affect that.
Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you so much for coming on, Tom.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, good.